This movie could have ended up buried forever in Hollywood's archive of abandoned projects. But instead, it became one of the most influential sci-fi action films in cinema history. What began with a bankrupt studio and destroyed sets ended in Oscar glory and hundreds of millions at the global box office. Movies Inside Out presents Total Recall is a 1990 film by Paul Verhoeven starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as an ordinary construction worker who can't tell where reality ends and implanted memory begins. Why did producers once consider the script hopeless? What injuries did the actors suffer? And why was there an ambulance stationed on set? How did the trailer nearly doom the entire project? And what got in the way of a sequel? All this and more in our new video. Ready? Then let's begin. The creation story. Picture this. It's 1974, and a young producer named Ronald Schwarzenegger is flipping through an old issue of a popular sci-fi magazine when he stumbles upon a short story by then unknown writer Philip K. Dick titled "We Can Remember It for You Wholesale." Just 23 pages long, but Schwarzenegger instantly knows this is gold. He shells out $1,000 for the adaptation rights. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the story of Total Recall turned into a 16-year marathon involving 7 directors, 4 screenwriters, 40 script drafts, and a budget that ballooned like a snowball. Schwarzenegger teamed up with Dan O'Bannon to turn Dick's short story into a full-length screenplay. The problem was, the original tale ended too abruptly. O'Bannon could only stretch it into a 30-page treatment. Basically, just Act 1. Acts 2 and 3 had to be invented from scratch. It was O'Bannon who proposed sending the main character to Mars, a decision that completely changed the project's trajectory. But conflict over the third act emerged quickly. O'Bannon wanted a more philosophical ending, while Schwarzenegger demanded something flashier. Producers liked the script, but considered it unfilmable due to the sky-high budget and complex effects. So Schwarzenegger and O'Bannon shifted gears to work on Alien, whose success landed Schwarzenegger a contract with Disney. He tried to pitch Total Recall there with a $20 million budget, but the third act still wasn't working, and by 1982, the project was sold to producer Dino De Laurentiis. De Laurentiis cycled through a lineup of directors: Richard Rush, Russell Mulcahy, Louis Teague, and Fred Schepisi, before finally settling on David Cronenberg in 1984. Cronenberg wasn't familiar with Dick's work, but found the script intriguing. Still, the third act continued to be a problem, and Cronenberg spent a full year writing 12 different drafts. Then came the real test. Cronenberg faced creative clashes. Schwarzenegger and De Laurentiis didn't want a deep, thoughtful movie like Blade Runner. They wanted an Indiana Jones Goes to Mars adventure. Cronenberg walked. Add to that casting disputes, he refused to work with Richard Dreyfuss as Douglas Quaid, pushing for William Hurt instead. Over the years, many actors were considered for Quaid: Christopher Reeve, Jeff Bridges, Harrison Ford, Matthew Broderick, Mark Harmon, and Tom Selleck. Imagine Total Recall starring any of them. It would have been a completely different film.
You're the same. No matter where you go, there you are. It's always the same old you. Let me suggest that you take a vacation from yourself.
Trying to cut costs, De Laurentiis even suggested removing Mars from the story altogether, but luckily, Schwarzenegger and O'Bannon stood their ground. As a result, the script issues and soaring budget kept the project stalled for years. By 1987, Bruce Beresford was being considered as director. Patrick Swayze was set to play Quaid, and sets were already under construction in Australia. Then, boom. In 1988, De Laurentiis' studio declared bankruptcy. 80 crew members were laid off, and the sets were destroyed. At that point, the project had already racked up $8 million in pre-production costs. But the story doesn't end there. Arnold Schwarzenegger had heard about the project back in the mid-80s and was intrigued. After the studio collapse, he persuaded Carolco Pictures to buy the rights for $3 million. Schwarzenegger took major control. He picked the writers and the director, oversaw key decisions, and secured a $10 million paycheck plus 15% of future profits. Not bad, right? Paul Verhoeven came on board as director. After RoboCop, he wasn't exactly eager to jump back into sci-fi, but he changed his mind after reading the Mars Hotel scene, where Dr. Edgemar tries to convince Quaid everything is just a memory implant.
Your dream started in the middle of the implant procedure. Everything after that, the chases, the trip to Mars, the suite at the Hilton, are all elements of your recall holiday and ego trip.
Verhoeven brought in Gary Goldman to revise the script, and the lead character had to be completely rewritten. Shy-Clerk Quayle became muscular construction worker Quaid to fit Schwarzenegger's image. After 16 years in development hell, Total Recall finally made it to production, but no one yet knew the mountain of challenges that still lay ahead. Casting. When it came to casting, Verhoeven knew he didn't just need pretty faces, he needed actors who could handle the physical demands of this wild production. Michael Ironside, cast as the ruthless Richter, had a pretty amusing history with Verhoeven. He had already failed an audition for the lead in RoboCop, and later turned down a villain role, saying he didn't want to play another psychopath.
Don't touch her.
But Richter intrigued him more, although there was a catch. After turning down a few roles in Hollywood, rumors had started swirling that Ironside was difficult, so the only way to cast him was through an audition. He had to act out a full-on breakdown, sobbing on the floor while Verhoeven filmed him in close-up. But that was nothing compared to what he'd endured during filming. We'll get to that later. The role of Benny, the Martian cab driver, was actually decided by Verhoeven's daughters. After watching tons of test footage, they chose Mel Johnson Jr. At first, when he read the description of Benny as a black hustler, he angrily tossed the script across the room. But later, he finished reading it and realized the character had depth, and the story was genuinely compelling.
Hey, don't worry about me, man. I'm on your side.
Ronnie Cox, who had already worked with Verhoeven on RoboCop, was cast as the villain Cohagen specifically because of his reputation as a friendly, likable guy. That contrast would make his transformation into an antagonist all the more shocking.
Do you think you could play along?
Yes, sir.
Great, because otherwise I'll erase your ass.
His character's slicked back hairstyle actually happened by accident. His hair was styled that way for a special effects mold, and Cox realized it was the perfect look. He even convinced Verhoeven to reshoot some earlier scenes to match it. Marshall Bell, who played George and voiced Quato, was initially confused. There was no explanation in the script about how the two characters were connected. Interestingly, Verhoeven had considered hiring a separate voice actor for Quato, but eventually decided Bell could do both.
Open your mind. Open your mind.
The female roles required serious physical training, so casting focused not only on acting talent, but athleticism as well. For the role of Melina, Nicole Kidman and Alexandra Paul were considered, but it ultimately went to Rachel Ticotin, who started her film career as a dancer and had the endurance to match.
You married?
Honey, she wasn't really my wife.
Oh, she isn't really your wife? How stupid of me. She was Hauser's wife?
Look, forget that I said
No,
wife.
let's just forget everything.
Laurie Quaid was played by then up-and-comer Sharon Stone. Schwarzenegger was so impressed by her dedication and training that he nicknamed her the Terminatrix.
She was training like a machine. I mean, she was like the female Terminator.
And the Stunt Women's Association even made her an honorary member. Ironside was the only one who never forgot she was a woman. Whenever she was knocked down in a scene, he always helped her back up.
Are you okay?
Guess I blew it.
Verhoeven was so impressed by Stone's ability to flip from sweet and timid to devilish and terrifying that he later cast her in Basic Instinct, the role that made her a global star.
Honey, you wouldn't hurt me, would you, sweetheart?
Richter's right-hand man, Helm, was played by Michael Champion.
I don't blame you, man. I wouldn't want a guy like Quaid porking my old lady.
You saying she likes it?
No, I'm sure she hated every minute of it.
Roy Brocksmith and Rosemary Dunsmore portrayed the rec hall employees, Dr. Edgemar and Dr. Renata Lull.
And I could pull this trigger, and it won't matter.
Doug, don't.
It won't make the slightest difference to me, Doug. But the consequences to you would be devastating.
The roles of the iconic three-breasted Martian woman, Mary, and Thumbelina, were played by Lycia Naff and Debbie Lee Carrington.
If you need any help with this one, give me a holler.
And just like that, Verhoeven assembled the perfect team of actors, each of whom brought their own unique energy to the film. The filming process. April 1989 marked the beginning of one of the most ambitious and grueling shoots in sci-fi film history. Total Recall was shot almost entirely in chronological order, a rare thing in Hollywood, over a span of 20 weeks. The original $30 million budget ballooned to an astronomical $65 million by the end of production. Most of the filming took place at Estudios Churubusco in Mexico City, where 43 actors and 500 crew members worked across 45 sets spread over 10 sound stages. The Earth train station scenes were filmed in the actual Mexico City subway, and some of the Martian landscapes were shot in Nevada's Valley of Fire. But things quickly spiraled into a nightmare.
What's wrong?
I just had a terrible thought. What if this is a dream?
Nearly everyone on set suffered from constant dust in the air and food poisoning from the local cuisine, leading to widespread gastroenteritis. The only exceptions were Ronald Shusett and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnie, having learned from his Predator experience in Mexico, insisted on having all his meals flown in from the US. Verhoeven got sick early on and never fully recovered. When he learned that each day in the hospital would cost the production $150,000, he chose to keep filming at all costs. Medics remained on standby near the set, administering IVs and injections during breaks. Verhoeven was often so weak he had to direct scenes from a stretcher, yet he told the crew filming would continue as long as he was alive. Even in that state, he remained strict and demanding. He often required up to 20 takes of a scene and never encouraged improvisation, sticking firmly to the script.
I don't give you enough information to think. You do what you're told. That's what you do.
Injuries were a constant threat. In one scene where Quaid smashes a train window, a micro-explosive was supposed to go off milliseconds before he touched it. It failed to trigger, and Arnold shattered real glass with his bare hand, seriously injuring his wrist. The crew bandaged it, covered it with his jacket, and filming continued. He also suffered numerous cuts and finger fractures. Michael Ironside broke his sternum and 2 ribs when he crashed into Michael Champion, who was holding a machine gun during the Mars Hotel chase. 3 weeks later, the producers asked him to return, but the insurance company demanded proof of physical readiness, specifically 50 push-ups. Against his doctor's advice, Ironside attempted it and re-injured himself. His first scene back was the elevator fight. Still not fully healed, he struggled to even lift his arm. To avoid further damage, he wore a special chest brace to keep his torso stable. And Schwarzenegger was extra cautious not to hurt him during takes. On a personal note, Ironside later fondly recalled how Arnold let him use his private trailer phone to stay in touch with his ill sister, even calling her himself to check in. Originally, the film was slated for release on June 15th, but post-production had to be sped up by 2 weeks to avoid clashing with Dick Tracy. Editor Frank Uriost worked overtime to finish the 113-minute cut in time. That meant no time for test screenings, a decision Verhoeven and Goldman felt negatively impacted the final result. As for the visuals, Total Recall was a true breakthrough. The film featured over 100 effects shots by DreamQuest Images, including miniatures and blue screen work. Created at the dawn of CGI, digital effects were only used for the X-ray scanner scene. CG at the time wasn't realistic enough for anything more. Most effects were practical, complex prosthetics, and animatronics for the robotic taxi drivers, the fat lady disguise, mutants, and decompression scenes. Rob Bottin, who had also worked with Verhoeven on RoboCop, handled the character effects. He and Verhoeven agreed to focus on grotesquely distorted flesh rather than gore, though the film still used over 3,000 blood squibs.
Those assholes at Recall have fucked up your mind. You're having paranoid delusions.
You call this a delusion?
For the Mars decompression scenes, Bottin created life casts of Schwarzenegger, Ticotine, and Cox, having them make exaggerated facial expressions. These casts were turned into masks with inflatable air pockets that distorted the features. The heads of Schwarzenegger and Ticotine were fully animatronic, with wires controlling their bulging tongues, foreheads, cheeks, and eyes. The famous three-breasted Martian woman was originally supposed to have 4 breasts, but producers thought that looked too much like a cow's udder. The effect was achieved using a prosthetic chest plate that stretched from Licia Naff's neck to her belly button. All 3 breasts were artificial, and applying the appliance took 2 makeup artists up to 8 hours. Naff later admitted she felt so awkward during filming, she nearly cried, even though she wasn't bearing her real chest. One of Bottin's most impressive creations was Quato, operated by 15 puppeteers. Marshall Bell wore a full-body suit, while Quato's head was entirely animatronic. On the first day, Bell spent 9 hours in the makeup chair. Though the process shortened with time, it remained exhausting. He even asked for a hidden opening in the suit for bathroom breaks. Quato looked so real, people asked Verhoeven if Bell had some kind of bizarre conjoined twin.
A man is defined by his action, not his memory.
Creating the Fat Lady costume was another major challenge. Finding an actress big enough to hide Arnold's frame was tough. Even after casting Priscilla Allen, her head was too small. The mask was redesigned multiple times and eventually became a 70-pound metal and resin rig.
Get ready for a surprise!
Most Martian landscapes were created with miniature sets, which were segmented and reconfigured for different scenes. The exploding Martian mountain was filmed in a former airship hangar due to its massive size, over 13 feet tall, and the need to set up lighting and cameras at a distance. Only the front half was built. The effects were operated from behind. The alien reactor was even larger, about 23 feet tall, making it one of the largest and most complex sci-fi sets ever built. Total Recall became one of the last major Hollywood blockbusters to rely so heavily on practical miniatures and set design instead of computer graphics. The soundtrack was composed by Oscar winner Jerry Goldsmith, known for Alien and Rambo. By the way, we've got videos on the making of both of those cult films on our channel. Don't miss them. For budget reasons, Goldsmith was initially supposed to work with musicians in Munich, but they weren't familiar with his style, and the result was disappointing. He eventually secured funding to record with the National Philharmonic Orchestra in London, which perfectly matched his vision of combining brass and strings with electronic elements. Verhoeven wanted the film to remain ambiguous, to leave viewers unsure, even by the end, whether it had all been a dream or reality. What do you think? Movie mistakes and errors. Now let's take a look at some of the mistakes and goofs you might have missed on your first watch. Even the most expensive Hollywood blockbusters have their slip-ups, and Total Recall is no exception. Bloody hands, no stains. Quaid touches the walls, turns off the lights, and grabs Laurie's arms as he tells her that spies are after him, then shows her his blood-covered hands. But strangely, there's no blood on her arms or the walls he touched. The vanishing stain. When Quaid drills into the mining rig's hose to stop Benny from attacking, oily fluid splashes right into his face. But in the very next shot, his face is completely clean. Double landing. After the shootout, Richter steps off the escalator, placing his foot next to one of his henchmen's bodies. But in the next shot, the same foot lands directly on the guy's chest. Miraculous recovery. Near the end of the film, Quaid and Melina are thrown into Mars' low-pressure atmosphere, and their faces swell up from the exposure. But as soon as they're back in breathable air, their faces instantly return to normal, even though they should have shown lasting damage from burst blood vessels. Bending set pieces. When Quaid and Richter are fighting in the elevator, Quaid slams Richter into the back wall, which visibly bends, revealing it's made from soft material. The same thing happens during the tunnel fight scene. Hologram desync. When Doug activates the hologram projector and waves a gun, his left arm is extended, but the hologram's arm is down at his waist. Bad disguise continuity. When Quaid's disguise malfunctions, he brings his hands to his mouth, and they're clearly a woman's hands with long nails. But once he removes the mask, his real hands have short masculine nails. Selective safety standards. The workers with jackhammers are shown wearing hard hats and earmuffs, presumably for safety. Doug and Harry, on the other hand, aren't wearing any protection at all. Recall! Where the set ends. In the final scene, as Quaid and Melina walk across the bridge, it's clearly visible where the painted backdrop begins. You can see the line where the real bridge ends and the painting starts. Arnold even pauses briefly at the transition point. Misspelled name. In the opening credits, the name of the original story's author, Philip K. Dick, is spelled incorrectly as Philip. Of course, none of these minor errors or technical hiccups take away from the impact of this incredible film. But maybe you spotted a few goofs we didn't mention? Let us know in the comments. Deleted scenes and behind the scenes. When Total Recall was first submitted to the American Film Rating Board, it received an X rating, the strictest classification, which would have made theatrical release nearly impossible. To avoid losing a wide release, Paul Verhoeven had to make compromises. Several scenes, such as Benny's death, the bar fight, Quaid's extraction from the memory machine, and Richter's arm loss, were originally much longer and more graphic. Unfortunately, the original cut hasn't survived, or at least hasn't been released to the public. Interestingly, Paul Verhoeven created an even tamer version for international markets. In Australia, the film received an M rating, which meant further edits beyond the American R-rated cut. Australian audiences didn't see alternate angles of the tunnel fight, the full bar brawl, and much more. Even the iconic three-breasted Martian appeared in more modest shots. And now, as always, we invite you to step behind the scenes of Total Recall and enjoy a selection of the most fascinating and thrilling moments from the set. worldwide recognition. The premiere of Total Recall nearly turned into a disaster. The first trailer, created by distribution company TriStar Pictures, was a major letdown for both Schwarzenegger and the audience. It featured no action or special effects, making the film look like a vague, low-budget drama. Fortunately, Arnold convinced the producers in time to allocate funds for a new trailer and a larger marketing campaign. And it worked. The film premiered on June 1st in over 2,000 theaters across the US and Canada, instantly grossing $25.5 million on its opening weekend. By mid-July, the movie had already crossed the $100 million mark, officially achieving blockbuster status. Although it didn't hold the top box office spot for long, losing it to the surprise hit Ghost. Its $119 million domestic gross made it the second highest earning film of the summer.
Son of a bitch.
Its international success exceeded all expectations. The film raked in another $142 million overseas, bringing its global total to $261 million, making Total Recall the fifth highest grossing film of the year. Critics had mixed reactions. Some praised it as a complex, visually stunning sci-fi story. Others criticized its excessive violence and lack of a coherent narrative structure. Rob Bottin's practical effects were so impressive, they earned the film an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. In addition to the win, Total Recall received 2 more Oscar nominations, for Best Sound and Best Sound Editing. The British BAFTA Awards nominated it for Best Special Visual Effects, and the Saturn Awards named it Best Science Fiction Film.
You're really an invincible secret agent from Mars who's the victim of an interplanetary conspiracy to make him think he's a lowly construction worker.
The success of Total Recall naturally sparked attempts at sequels and spin-offs. Initially, there were plans for a full-fledged sequel starring Schwarzenegger, but Carolco's bankruptcy derailed those plans. Writers Ron Shusett and Gary Goldman even adapted another Philip K. Dick story, The Minority Report, as a potential follow-up, but it was eventually developed into a standalone film by Steven Spielberg in 2002. In 1999, a TV series titled Total Recall 2070 premiered, though it had little in common with the original film and resembled a Blade Runner adaptation more than anything. In 2012, Columbia Pictures released a big-budget remake starring Colin Farrell, but it flopped both critically and at the box office, failing to capture the magic of the original. The original cast went on to different paths. Schwarzenegger reached the peak of his career with Terminator 2, then made a surprise move into politics before eventually returning to acting. Sharon Stone reunited with Verhoeven for Basic Instinct and became one of the biggest stars of the 1990s. Today, she and Rachel Ticotin continue acting in film and TV. Michael Ironside and Marshall Bell became sought-after character actors in Hollywood, while Mel Johnson Jr. appears on screen less frequently. Ronnie Cox, aside from his acting career, built a second career as a folk musician, touring with his band. Lisha Naff, who played the three-breasted Martian, transitioned into journalism, and Debbie Lee Carrington, who portrayed Thumbelina, continued taking small roles in film and television until her death in 2018. Time has only strengthened the film's reputation. Today, Total Recall is regularly ranked among the greatest sci-fi films of all time. Some critics even consider it the best adaptation of Philip K. Dick's work, surpassing Blade Runner, and its soundtrack is seen as one of Jerry Goldsmith's most iconic scores. The film became a cultural phenomenon, and Quaid's line,
Consider that a divorce.
after killing Laurie became one of the most quoted lines in Schwarzenegger's career. And of course, the three-breasted Martian forever earned her place in cinema history as one of its most unforgettable characters. So what about you? Does Total Recall rank among your favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger films?